Hello, everyone. This is Catalina Rojas. I work at PCDN, and welcome to our August session of internships done right. As you know, PCDN developed a career series where every month we go in depth with a topic that is critical to building your career for social change and impact. And August is dedicated to all discussions, the good, the bad, and the ugly about interns. And today in this webinar, we had the great pleasure of having three guests, if you include myself, but we are going to have a very honest, very true conversation about what internships are, how to best market yourself for an internship, when to do one, when not to do one, and also very excited with the guests that we have today, which will enrich these topics of conversations even further. Before we go into introducing our great guests, Katie and Rukmini, let me just tell you a little bit about what's going on with PCDN beyond the career series. We started in August the Facebook Career Helping Line, which is the first one of its kind. Is a Facebook group where you can post your questions about careers and your peers will answer 24/7. And in addition to that, we have a career advisory blog, which these are world-known experts from all sorts of fields. We select a lot of your questions that you post, and by the way, thank you for those questions. And then we have the career experts answer some of them. We already have above 500 members and more questions that we can dream of, and it's going really great. And also for the fall that is new about PCDN, stay tuned because we're going to start a social change career podcast. So stay tuned for that. We're very excited about giving you another way of engaging with PCDN and content. Okay, so going back to our topic of internships, let me introduce our great guest of today. First, we have Katie Kross. Katie, thank you so much for being in our internship discussion. Katie, come to us she is the current Managing Director of the Center for Energy, Development, and the Global Environment, EDGE, at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. She manages the center. She has over 10 years in university and nonprofit administration experience. She's also the author of the book Profession and Purpose, a resource guide for MBA careers in sustainability. And I'm going to say this again because I find these publications so unique and useful. The Profession and Purpose, a resource guide for MBA careers in sustainability. So we have Katie with all her wealth of experience as someone who manages a center with students that are doing MBA with sustainability and developing careers of impact. And our other guest is someone that we know because actually we developed a relationship with her as a student at the Masters of Georgetown University. Rukmini Banerjee was a student of Professor Selizer, but now she is program manager at an organization here in Washington, D.C. called HasNa Incorporated, which is a DC-based nonprofit. And she is currently implementing peace building and development projects in Turkey, Cyprus, and Armenia. So from Rukmini, we're going to hear the first account experiences of internships and how she's now shifted from being an intern to being a supervisor of interns. And if we have time, which we probably will, I will tell you a little bit about my experience also supervising interns in an organization and sort of what, from a supervisor experience, what to do and what not to do in terms of having successful internships. So, Katie, we would like to hear your experience with managing and hiring interns, and also very important, that linkage that you have from having a student/intern and preparing them for the market in the future, so for their employability. If you can talk a little bit about your experience with interns and what best lessons to offer for those that are seeking internships and how to be more smart or smarted about selecting internships.
Sure. So thanks. It's great to be with you guys today. I am going to talk not so much from our personal, experience with interns, though we do hire interns in our center, but more from my research with practitioners in the impact career space and how we counsel our students on their internship choices. And we are here based at a business school, but some of the lessons are transferable, obviously, to students of many other disciplines. Most of our students are in a full-time MBA program, and they're interested in either a sustainability career or a career in the impact sector writ large, including nonprofit, government, impact investing, social entrepreneurship, sort of a broad span of interests. And most of our students are typically looking at summer internships, but I think that the lessons in selecting a summer internship and what you would look for, they would also apply when you're evaluating a fall internship while you're a student, or also in thinking about how you might take on volunteer projects or other types of projects while you're a student. So there are three main objectives that I challenge our students to look for when they are evaluating and selecting an internship in terms of what the main goals of the internship are. So the first is that the internship is one of the very best ways you have as a student to fill a gap on your resume. Many grad students especially are career changers. Maybe they have some previous work experience of some kind, but they're going to graduate school because they want to move into a different sector or a different role or a different industry. And the internship is a great tool for, creating an experience on your resume that you don't have previously. So, the first criteria when looking for an internship to take is, does it fill a gap on your resume? And the gap that you might want to fill can be very different for every student. It might depend. It might be if they're trying to demonstrate that they have experience in a different sector. They might look for private sector experience when they've had public sector experience previously. It could be, for some students, it might be having a particular type of industry on their resume, or a particular type of functional skills on the resume. Or even it can be things like team building or leadership experience. So think about how the internship, whatever internship you choose, is going to complement what's already on your resume, besides any work experience you have, but also your academic credentials. So that's the first goal. The second goal for any internship is to have a great story to tell at the end of the summer. So imagine yourself, or at the end of the internship, whenever that might be. So imagine yourself in a future job interview. You're interviewing for that full-time job that you want after graduation, and they ask you, tell me about your internship. You would like to have one of those great, we call them STAR format stories. So, what was the situation, the challenge that you were issued, the need or the problem that was presented to you? What were the tasks that were given to you? What was the action you took? And then what was the result of that? So in thinking about how that applies to your decision, the best kind of internships are projects that you are handed a project that you have some degree of freedom to take from start to completion, right? A challenge that's not, maybe it's not so well defined, and it gives you opportunity to have creative insight along the way and then see it through to some kind of completion point. So look for those as you're thinking about your internship. Now, even if you're an undergrad and your internship is mostly filing or data entry, can you look for opportunities to improve the organization, or to come up with sort of mini projects within that internship that would make for a good interview story later? So maybe most of your time is spent on data entry, but in doing that, you identify a need for a new type of data management system, and you are able to take initiative and implement that solution. So that's the second. And then the third, very briefly, is does the internship give you an opportunity to build your personal and professional network? So, there are internships, I'm sure, where you spend a lot of time sitting and researching behind a computer, but can you look for ways to use that internship as an opportunity to reach out and connect with more people? Even if you're doing research, does the project that you're working on enable you to do some firsthand research by making phone calls or having coffee with others? Are there opportunities in the organization that you're interning with to get to meet the other staff in the organization, and is your direct supervisor, willing to help facilitate that? Sometimes those opportunities will be presented to you, and other times you really need to ask for them as an intern. So you want to leave with like the end of your internship having a bunch of new names on your Rolodex. So it might be within the organization you're working for, but it could be within the wider sphere of contacts that organization can facilitate. So those would be in my mind, the three most important assets to using your internship as a stepping point for that next career move. We can't hear you, Catalina.
Oh, sorry now.
Yes.
I was just saying how much I appreciate your 3 points, especially the first one, that is just such a great way to answering the question that help people guide when perhaps it's not a good idea to do yet another internship. If it's filling a gap, if it's serving a purpose to bring you further in your career, that sounds like it's a good idea. But I think that point of the gap is really great. And I have a question from you that actually came from the Facebook Career Helping Line, where we were talking about internships, because the questions are really random, but the topic of internships came out, and it was one person. It's a little bit of a hard question, so I apologize for putting you on the spot. She said, well, internships, good and everything, but what do we do when people cannot afford to work for free for a whole semester? What can we do when people don't have the parents that have the money to keep a person without a salary for 6 months? Is an internship something of a privilege for certain students that they can take advantage? And how do we make this an opportunity as open as available for all students? So I wonder if you have a take on that.
Yeah, it really. It's tough when internships don't pay. A lot of internships do pay, and I would encourage anyone who's considering an internship, they either pay or you can get academic credit. You can't do both. So, for some students, they have a means to doing it and getting academic credit, and then the credit is valuable in that it, is one less class that you have to take, right? So it justifies the time. It does, I think that it is a hard choice if someone is offering you an internship and not offering to pay you for it. And if you were going to consider a project like that, then I would say be just as selective as you want to be, because there are a zillion organizations out there that would love to have you work for free. So if you're giving away your time for free, it better be meeting all of your career needs, and you should be asking for that. So I also think that it's worth asking about pay. Many internships do pay, or they'll give a stipend, and maybe the school or can match that. Some schools have funds to subsidize low-paying internships, especially if they're summer internships. But I don't really believe in not paying our interns. I wish that more organizations would, because I think that it's a valuable contribution. If you can't get paid, I would think about what are the other vehicles that can make it valuable to you and worth the investment of your time. So maybe there's some other. If the relationship in that internship is so valuable that it's going to open the doors to a full-time job, then it might be worth it. But I would be very selective about the ones that don't pay.
And thank you for that answer. I agree 100% with you. And I think in the social change sector, we need to have more honest conversations about this. And as you said, what value are you going to get if you're not going to get money? What sort of concrete value you're getting and how selective you can be? Because just the fact that you're not going to get paid doesn't mean that anyone can take you, and you have some power from where you are. And I thank you for that answer, because I think it's uncomfortable to talk about these things. We're not talking about these things enough, and this is why we want to open up these conversations here at PCDN. So Katie, any other questions that are great but small audience have for Katie, or maybe Craig has a question or a comment? If not, then we can move on to Rukmini.
I would say one question, and this is for everyone. And for the people who are calling in, if you want to type any questions or during the open session, you can chat them in, reading video. But just one question for everyone to consider: how do you know when you've done too many internships? Because there is a danger of getting stuck on an internship treadmill. So, I mean, for Katie, Kata, and Rukmini, do you have an idea, like, if you've done two, be careful of doing a third, because you don't want to just be a perpetual intern?
Well, my take on that is that you want to do internships while you're a student, and very, rarely, occasionally, if you don't have a full-time job at the end of that degree, whatever that is, whether it's an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree, that you might consider taking one more internship after graduation, but that's it. I mean, internships are something that you would do as a student. Now, if you are someone who's doing a lot of project work, then you maybe after graduation, then it's not an internship, it's an independent consultant role, right? So you put that on your resume as a independent consultant, and you might do multiple projects in that way. But you're not gonna, the internship is primarily a tool for students. Now, if you're a student and you happen to have in a 4-year degree, you take 3 internships, there's no problem with that, because it's while you're a student.
Yeah, and I can just add that also make sure that the internships that you're choosing make some kind of sense, is directly related to your field of interest or any specific skill sets that you're trying to develop. So I think that it has to sort of have some kind of a logical progression. The choice of organizations or the period that you choose to intern with them, whether it's for a semester or 2 semesters, or if there's a possibility of the internship turning into a job later on, then maybe you can potentially commit more time. So it really depends, like Katie said, on the gap that you're trying to fulfill. So so I think that the number of internships and the time that you commit depends on that.
I'll just add one more thing. I remembered that I have run across some unusual circumstances where organizations call it an internship, and the terminology, varies a little bit. Most of the employers that I interact with, they are talking about a temporary assignment that they're looking for a student primarily to fill. But there are, I have come across NGOs where it's listed as internship. It's a paid full-time year-long job, and it's more of like a temp to hire kind of thing, because maybe they don't have the funding for the long term. In that case, I don't think of it as an intern. I don't think of it as an internship. I think of it as a job. You would put that on that position, under your professional experience, for the year that you're doing it, and then hopefully you continue on, or else you move on to another full-time job. So there's a little bit of discrepancy on the terminology in some cases.
Yeah, we actually in PCDN, we used to have interns that will come and work with us, and then we just wanted to change not only the terminology but also the contracting proposition. And we have now program assistant, who is someone that has been with us for a few years, and she doesn't get a huge amount of money, but she works on an hourly basis. And it's a complement to her new career. She's a career changer, and it's a fabulous relationship, and she's contributed with so much content, doing sometimes boring tasks, but sometimes engaging in her own passions and sharing her knowledge, and it's been absolutely wonderful. And PCDN doesn't do internships in the traditional sense of the word, so I think organizations also sometimes have there's different terminologies, but organizations think back and change also the terms of, and we wanted this to be somewhere in which they might not be getting a huge amount of money, but they get a little bit of compensation for their contribution to the organization. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I want to introduce you to our another great guest. Her name is Rukmini Banerjee. I just told you she's program manager at HasNa here in Washington, D.C. And she's going to talk to us a lot about, from her little bit personal experience of what it was to be an intern in both India and then as part of a student at the Master's at Conflict Resolution in Georgetown, and then now her experience being here in a supervisor of interns herself now that she's a program manager. And I was going to say that also Rukmini contributed to a blog post this month, in the month of August. One of the blog posts is written by her and is about her trajectory of being an intern as a in the social change field. So without further ado, Rukmini, the floor is yours, and thank you for contributing to this conversation.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to participate. I really do appreciate it. Well, my journey has been a little bit, it's been, for me, in my head, it's a little unique because as I have mentioned, if you read my blog post as well, I come from a different background. I didn't really come from a very traditional political science, international relations background. I was an English literature student in India. I was already doing my master's degree in English literature in India when I decided that I wanted to pursue a second degree in peace building and conflict resolution. And but I knew that there was, I had been a student all along. I got into my first master's program directly after I finished my undergrad. And then already in my master's program, I started sort of preparing for my second master's. So I didn't really take a break in between to work a little, get some full-time work experience, and then go back to graduate school. So it was one after the other constantly for me. So I was faced with this problem of, that I had all these degrees, or I was going to pursue these degrees, but I didn't have as much work experience to complement the degrees. And I also knew that my ultimate professional goal was not to be in academia, but I wanted to be a practitioner. I wanted to practice peace building and conflict resolution. So that made work experience all the more important for me. So I started preparing for that while I was already in India. My first internship was with Save the Children in Calcutta in India. And then I worked there over a summer, and actually I approached Save the Children in Calcutta didn't have an existing internship program, a summer internship program, but their office happened to be very close to my university, and I had volunteered with them a couple of times before that, so I knew somebody in the office. So I kind of approached them and asked them if they would let me do a summer internship with them, and they agreed. So they didn't really have a structured internship program, so it was really up to me to make to get the most out of it. And they put me on a project called the Street to School project, and I completed that. And I realized that because it was a small branch office in Calcutta with limited number of staff members, they were not really prepared to supervise an intern. So I often felt like I was just adding to their workload by constantly asking them questions, or expecting me to explain part of their work for me, or expecting them to send me more work to do. So while on the one hand, it gave me a great opportunity to learn more about the work going on in the field, and to, to sort of get my first real work experience in the development sector in India, I also felt like it would have been nice to have someone mentor me or supervised me throughout the experience. So that was my first internship experience. And then when I finally applied to Georgetown and was accepted, and I moved to the United States, and I started as a graduate student here in the conflict resolution program, I already had a research within the conflict resolution program. And because I was a foreign student, there were certain restrictions on my ability to work both on campus and off campus. So, I would have to go through a lot of paperwork, and, it was also a bit expensive for me to get authorization to have a paid job outside campus as an international student. So I realized that the easiest way for me to work actually at that point was to be able to do unpaid internships off campus. So my first year, I in addition to my research assistantship work, I volunteered with the United States Institute of Peace, and it didn't cost me any extra money because it was a remote volunteer opportunity, so I could just sit at home and work on my laptop, and so I didn't really have to spend money commuting to the USIP office, and that was convenient because I worked on their peace media project, and I learned a lot about web content curation and social media management skills, etc. So here I was being able to work with USIP, which is a prestigious organization, and this is directly related to my field of study. But at the same time, it wasn't, apart from my time and apart from learning a new skill, I wasn't really, in terms of expenses, I wasn't having to invest anything. So that worked out well. And then I was very grateful, and I guess I was also lucky in a way that I received the conflict resolution program summer fellowship to work in any country of my choice over the summer after the end of my first year of graduate school. And that's when, because my specialized track was refugees and humanitarian emergencies, I chose to go work in Turkey with the Turkish Red Crescent Society on their Syrian refugee response operations. And I spent the entire summer there. And even there, originally, we had some trouble at first because the organization was not prepared to host an intern. They never had interns before, so they didn't really know how much work to entrust us with. But I persisted, and I kept asking my supervisor, if there was work to do. Every day I would go into the office, just show up and keep asking for work. And then eventually they kind of started entrusting me with small tasks, and then they had enough faith in me to give me a big project to work on. So over the 10 weeks that I was there, initially it was kind of slow, but then they had enough faith in me to kind of give me more important and more meaningful work to do. So I was able to get some important experience and skills out of that internship. And then while I was in Turkey, actually, I already started thinking about what I wanted to do for the fall. So I applied for an internship position at Ashoka because I was working on innovative methods of delivering food assistance, and that got me interested in social innovation. And so I wanted to work for an organization that supported social entrepreneurship. And I applied to Ashoka, and I interviewed with them while I was still in Turkey. And then by the time I got back to DC, I already had my internship lined up for the fall. So I started working with Ashoka in the fall. And then at the end of the fall semester, my supervisor offered to extend my internship into the spring semester. So I ended up working with Ashoka right to the end of my second academic year, so right up to graduation. So that was it. That was my last. And I also had my research assistantship position in my second year. So that was the end of my internship. And then I graduated in May 2014, and then in July I got hired by HasNa, and I've been working there ever since. And I have now gradually transitioned into a more managerial role where I have to recruit and supervise interns myself. So that's been my journey.
And you, Rukmini. I really enjoy listening to the trajectory one because it's not an easy feat what you have done, being an international student from India, coming to the United States and being. It sounds like you were kind of fulfilling the 3 steps that Katie was giving. You know,
Right,
what are
exactly.
the tips that you wanted to feel, but also like it seems that in your story, one internship led to the other one. I really like how you talked about how the USIP internship did not cost you in terms of expenses, but how do you see the value of it, which is it goes to tell like and also you didn't have ideal experiences. I want to talk a little bit about adding to the workload when organizations are not set up or having thought. They're like, yeah, free labor, but they don't really set up systems of how to effectively use interns. I think that speaks to your personality, your resourcefulness, your creativity of getting value and also making it work. An internship can also be a disaster or be a great experience. You also didn't tell that by the time you were in Turkey, there was a lot of turmoil,
Exactly.
and it was a crazy time. But you make it work also because you kept the eyes on the prize, and you're still working it. And I really appreciate your story and how you strategically use the time that you were a student to move from a master's in English literature to becoming a practitioner in peace building which was your original goal. So I think that's great insights and inspiration to other people that are listening to this webinar that are coming from overseas, and they might just think that landing what you did is just an impossible feat. So congratulations, and I look forward to everything that you have to offer and to do. And at this point, I want to go back for a second because we got a question from one of our participants.
Sure.
It's from Bree, and it's a question that both of you are welcome to answer. It was originally think in terms of one of the comments that Katie made about organizations having different titles and having an internship, but it's more of a full-time temp job masquerading as an internship. So the question that Bree had is, what is the recommendation in terms of negotiating the position title once it becomes clear that it's like a 1-year salaried position? Is it smart? Is it advisable? What is your take on that question? I think it's a great question, and then we can move on to our final part of this webinar.
So my understanding is that's going to depend a lot on the organization. But if an organization's offering you a full-time job and they're using it, their internal title is internship. But your understanding is that it's for at least a year and then possibly continuing on if there's additional funding. I think it's a very plausible conversation to have with that organization when they're making you the offer. So do they, is there another title for resume purposes? Sometimes organizations have an internal kind of job title and then an external job title. So I also, presumably in those kind of roles, you would be with the organization for some period of time, and then you could worry about it a year afterwards, when you're on the job search again, what title to put on your resume at that point. So I guess I wouldn't try to be, I wouldn't try to be deceitful about it, but I think that would be a very easy conversation to have with the organization about, is this an acceptable way to word this? If I was taking a full-time job after graduation, I agree that I would not want to put intern as my job title. But if it's your role is working on XYZ project, is there another title, project associate or something like that?
Right. And just to sort of go off of what Katie said, I agree that you can, I think, have an honest conversation with your supervisor or whoever is in charge of, sort of like, just to give an example from my own experience, I worked with Ashoka for almost an entire year. So at that point, at the end of the year, I told my supervisor that when I was done with the interview, I wanted to have an exit interview with him just to get feedback on, on my work as an intern, and, where I can improve, etc. And during that exit interview, I told him that, I would like to, is it okay if I present my time at Ashoka? Is it okay when I write about my experience at Ashoka on my resume, can I call myself an associate? Because I spent a lot of time working not only within the team that I was placed in within Ashoka, but I worked with several other teams within the organization as well. And, I did work that I didn't expect to be doing at Ashoka. So in some ways, I felt like I had made a significant contribution to the organization. And I asked my supervisor if he would be okay with me calling myself an associate rather than a graduate intern in my resume. And he was completely okay with that. So I think that, if you have an open conversation with your colleagues or your supervisors, then it's very easy to sort of negotiate. And also sometimes, as far as I know, the Department of Labor has different rules for for-profits and non-profits in terms of paid internships and unpaid internships. So, and if you're doing an unpaid internship, I think one of the rules is that it has to be entirely for the benefit of the intern. So, taking that as a sort of negotiating point, you can definitely frame your internship in a way that is most beneficial for you.
Thank you, Rukmini. And just on that caveat, I think it's an important question. And I agree with both Katie and Rukmini, but I also want to add, don't come across, please don't be mad at me, but don't come across as in the first time that you have a meeting with your supervisor and come with a list of demands of how you want your title, how many hours you want to work, and don't do that on the first. I think one of the reasons, because Rukmini worked there for a year and she showed her worth at the end, emphasis, her supervisor was happy to give her, quote unquote promotion because she had proven herself. Just a caveat, and just how to present and market yourself. Don't come across as I need this, I need that, I'm entitled to this, because that's not a good way to start a working relationship with an organization. And if you're not going to get money, at the very least, you don't want burn bridges in a whole sector where organizations talk amongst each other. I don't know if Craig has something to say, or if we go to the last part. Okay, so the last part, I was working in an organization in gender and economic opportunity here in Washington, D.C. for a few years. And I was given the opportunity, I was allowed to have an intern. And my department was basically myself. And I had a ton of work to do, absolutely a ton of work to do. And we are a 501c3. We were a nonprofit. So I sat down. I was not giving any guidelines as an organization. I was entirely left just with the permission to hire anyone, but I could have done. And I was aware that a lot of the internship experiences is basically people doing runs to Starbucks and, how you take your mochachinos and basically being an expert and a barista at the end of the 4 months or something like that. I had a need. I had a ton of work to do and I needed someone to help me. But I also wanted to be a fulfillment experience, and I had been a professor in the past. So this was my chance. I saw it to have a student-teacher relationship with just one person for a whole month and being able to be part of the growth, the professional growth of that individual. So the first semester I did the hiring myself, and I started working with the person that, I went through a full interview process as if this was a salaried position. I hired the person that I thought it was best. And as a manager, I knew that I was a delegator. And I told the person from the very beginning, you're a part of my team. I'm not going to make you do my coffee. I don't need you here for that. And you're gonna here work with me. We're going to work together. You're my teammate. We're going to build this department from scratch. And I can tell you how, I am friends now with some of their interns. I've seen them get PhDs, get married, get divorced, have babies. We developed an amazing relationship after they became my interns. And I've seen them grow professionally. From the point of view as a supervisor, I think there is a lot more conversations that we need to have in terms of how ready are the organizations, how much seriousness, because what I gain, I didn't do this because I'm a good person. Perhaps there's a percentage of goodness that I have in me, but I just really needed a lot of work. And what I got in return was a lot of good work done. That I couldn't have accomplished in that period of time. And the people grew a lot, and we all grew. We wrote manuals about how to do what to do in my internship, and then the interns were doing the hiring, so they were getting hiring experience as well. I was very creative in order to free myself time to do my type of work and give a lot of substantive work and professional growth to organizations. So I just wanted to say, from the point of view of supervisor and employers, organizations also need to create the systems and hopefully give the students a good experience as well. I think there is a super specific question, unless any one of you have comments or questions about, what it is from the employer perspective, from the supervisor perspective, what sort of tips of wisdom do you have? I'm going to let Craig say a few words while I look to the last question.
Mute your mic. So thank you everyone for the great wisdom. So just the one thing I want to share, as an intern, it's important to have the perspective of how can you make your employer or your supervisor's life and work easier, of course within boundaries. So I think one of the reasons Rukmini was so successful, she really volunteered for everything. And although she had some challenges, really took advantage and always tried to be helpful. So if you come with that kind of attitude, I'm here to contribute and make things easier and take initiative, if it's the right organization, you can be incredibly successful. And then one other thing I want to say is also, maybe if you all have advice, how do you know if an organization is a healthy place? Because there's also lots of places that people intern that are dysfunctional, or they treat interns poorly. So how do you kind of vet an organization if you don't have any personal connections to know if you should invest your time?
So, so the question of how do you vet an organization, presumably you would find people to talk to. So you'd find people who've worked there, whether they were an intern or not, so you can get a better sense of the culture. There's sort of I guess there's a sense of, there's two different dynamics here. When often there are paid internships, and those, it's competitive to get those, but once the organization makes you an offer for those, then they want you in just the same way as they would be making a full-time offer. And you really should not shortchange your ability there to ask for what you want. If you've gone through a competitive interview process and they have selected you, before you make your decision, you should let them know, here's what else I'd like to know about the organization. What kind of, culture is it like? What kind of mentoring opportunities will I have? Can I call myself a marketing associate instead of an intern? Whatever the ask is. I definitely think there's a little bit of a different power dynamic if you are proposing yourself as an intern, or you're asking an organization to host you as an unpaid intern. Then the sort of the balance of power there in that conversation is a little bit different. It can be, especially if it's not something that they put out competitively. And so I can understand the advice of don't go in with too many demands. But at the same time, don't shortchange your value, especially if you're going to be spending your hours to make an organization better and you're not getting paid for it in return. So I do think that, you need to demonstrate how you're adding value to that organization. So why are you asking for this internship? How will it benefit them? How will you contribute what will you get out of it, and show in every respect how you're going to make this an easy process for them rather than a burden to them. But I also, think that doesn't mean you should put up with a toxic work environment or not get treated, not be valued for your contributions in the way that you should. And in that case, you still have the right to investigate what's the work environment like here, and can I speak with some of your past interns or some of your other staff members?
Yeah, I think it's the question of how to vet is the same question. How would you vet if a job is a good fit for you or not? There's two things I see. One is the organization as a whole. You can have an amazing progressive organization, but who's gonna be your direct report, who you're gonna work, who's your boss, and your immediate team is how you're going to define your day-to-day happiness or lack thereof. So find out during the interview, you can interview them as well. Find out who your supervisor will be. Find out if there's any internal systems, is there any manuals, if you can, like Katie says, if you can speak with other past interns. And it's how they respond to these questions, how open they are. You're checking them out in all aspects. If they're defensive, they don't answer their questions, they don't want you to contact other team members, ask them run through a day-to-day, how would it look like, and they might not hand you the manual, but is this an organization and people that looks like it's okay to ask questions? They haven't considered doing a manual, but they're open to it. So you can check them out and you can see what we call red flags if you are open to seeing them. But it's just like what it will happen with if you're checking out an organization for a position.
I'll just add, these days it's easier than ever to do your homework. So, Glassdoor or LinkedIn, you can look at who were the interns there in the past and reach out to people directly and say, I'm considering an internship at XYZ organization. I see that you may have worked there in the past. Would you have 10 minutes to speak with me about your experience? So you don't have to have a personal connection. You don't have to have a school connection. As long as it's an organization that has, more than one employee, there's chances are there's someone else out there with an opinion.
I have a couple questions that arrived that are actually so great, and with that we're actually kind of closing our session today, but these are great questions to end with. What advice would you offer to students who take an internship and then find out that the internship is not what they expected? It was incorrectly advertised, the environment is toxic, or any other circumstance, and the student wants to leave before the internship ends. What would you all consider good and bad reasons to cut an internship short?
I could go first on that. My personal take on that is that, depending on how bad the situation is, and especially if it's unpaid, then unless you have any financial obligations to the organization, if you think that it is bad to the point of being intolerable and that it's affecting your mental health and your ability to be productive and get on with your normal life, then just leave, because nothing is more important than your mental health. And if you're not getting what you want out of it, just have an honest conversation, give feedback to your organization and say that you realize that this is not a good fit for you and you would rather get out while there is still time, and maybe give them the opportunity to replace you with somebody else who's a better fit for the position, than just stay there as a placeholder and not really be able to contribute because it's a mutually bad fit. So I would say, it's really up to you. You need to decide, especially in case of an unpaid internship, whether or not this is working out for you or not. And if it's not working out for you, if you're dreading going into work every morning, then I think the better decision would be to leave and use the time that you spend at your internship in more productive ways.
I'll add that, usually internships are short, right? They're not supposed to be years-long endeavors. They're supposed to be a semester or a summer. So the question is, what were your goals when you started the internship? And is there still a way for you to meet some or all of those goals in the span of the time that you have remaining? I completely agree. If it's really, if it truly is a toxic environment and you're feeling miserable, then, you have not much at risk to walk away. On the other hand, I think there is a point at which you should first ask yourself the question, like, why did I take this internship? Is it because I want that company's name on my resume? Is it because I wanted to meet more people in the field? Is it because I thought I was going to be doing, finance, and instead they have me doing, filing? And then ask, is there a way to get what I want out of the remaining weeks of this internship? And that could be a conversation with your manager. It could be taking more initiative to go after the kinds of work that you want to do while you're still an intern. It might be a compromise, like, well, I'll finish XYZ project that you have asked me to do, but what I'd really like to work on is this. Can we find a way for me to do both so I can get that? You don't have a lot on the line when you're an intern. So, unless it's an organization that you're really hoping to work for full time, it's not that risky to walk away, but then you do have the opportunity cost of having missed out on the potential value that was the reason you took the internship in the first place.
Yeah, I like Rukmini's experiences are a good example of showing your first experience at Save the Children that was less than ideal. And if it's not an extreme environment, if it's a less than ideal, most internships will not be perfect and you will tend to do a lot of tedious work. But how can you take the best advantage, how you can find an amazing mentor, and how you can deal with obstacles. Also, how can an obstacle make you a better professional? If we go back to Katie's 3 points, a horrible internship could be a great story of how you surpassed. You had these obstacles, that you had this manager and you couldn't do anything, but would the story end better if you just quit and abandon that rather than taking on and seeing that you were able to actually accomplish X, Y, and Z, even in spite of all these obstacles? So it's easier for us to say, yeah, stick it out. It's only 6 weeks. It can be hard because it's your present, it's your reality at the moment. But step back for a second and see a little bit in the long term what you can get out of it, and a great story of resourcefulness and resilience could be what you were there for in the first place. So sometimes those big obstacles are actually great teaching moments, and we all had stories. Maybe one day we'll do a webinar on how, for instance, at least Craig and I have quitted jobs that we accepted, that we vetted, and why we walk away. Sometimes you do walk away, but sometimes you take those as great lessons. I want to be mindful of time, and we're always almost at the completion of our time. So I want to ask if either Rukmini, Katie, or Craig, or anyone else that is with us here have a question or a comment for us to close here. So I just want to ask.
I guess my final comment will just be that, one of the best approaches is to just be really deliberate and thoughtful about your choice of the internship, but then also what your goals are for that internship. So at the start of it, maybe you even write it down, maybe you even discuss it with your supervisor, but I know what you've asked me to do, but here's some of the other things that I'm really hoping to gain from this internship. And, check in with yourself partway through, are you meeting those goals? Are you developing the kinds of skills that you wanted to develop? Are you building the right kinds of connections that you'd like to develop? And when you do that, I think that and you're not worried about all the other noise around you of what you think you're supposed to want, or what your classmates are doing, or what was advertised, but instead you focus very specifically on your personal goals, then I think that usually you'll find a way to make it a useful experience, even if it's not every day isn't, the most fulfilling.
Yeah, and to that, I just add that, don't be afraid as an intern. I think don't be apologetic that you're an entry level or a junior level member of the organization, or that don't ever be afraid to ask questions or to put in your contributions, because you know what, that's how we all learn, and you are there to learn. It is meant to be an educational environment. People do internships so that they can get an idea of what the professional world is like, mostly to complement their academic experience in universities. So it is very important to be able to constantly challenge ideas, ask questions, and not be intimidated by the work environment, no matter how scary it might seem sometimes. And I'm saying this especially from the perspective of somebody who, is an international student, has been an international student, and now a foreign worker in this country. And, I can't emphasize enough how, humility, sincerity, all these qualities are important, but also be unafraid to take on any task and be unafraid to ask questions.
Well, that's a great note to finish, and I want to thank our great guest, Rukmini, for your honesty and for your sharing your personal journey. And Katie, I was just thinking, gee, these students at Duke University, they are so lucky to have a career counselor as talented and as awesome as you are. And for everyone else that doesn't have career mentors and coaches, PCDN is here for you, and we are so happy to have you in our team, Katie. Thank you, both of you, for your contributions, and stay tuned for next month, which is to grad or not to grad, is the ever important questions of whether to do grad school or not. And if you haven't checked the Facebook Career Helping Line, take a look. As I said, we're growing every day. The questions are great, and it's a great place to learn, but also to help others, because in the field of sustainability and social impact, we're here not only to improve our careers, but also to improve the life of others. And thank you for our very small but very focused and attentive group. If you want to come and check out, you can come back to our website, and this webinar will be there. Thank you. This month was August, and here with you, Catalina and Craig, helping behind the scenes. Thank you to Craig as well, and see you next month. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Catch with you later. Bye.
Bye.